Our guest today is one of those you might call a great guy. To that I would add, a really lucky guy. He is extremely well known throughout Manatee County, partly because he grew up right here. Soon after high school, he entered the military. He believes strongly in America. He also believes strongly in his family. While in service, he married his wonderful wife, who is with us today, and they brought 4 children into this world. He was shot down while in service, but was picked up by an American helicopter. Thus, he escaped the status of POW and managed to stay out of an enemy prison, but he could not escape some serious injuries. His family has lived in Palmetto for a long time, so it seemed almost natural that he should become the mayor of that city. Following that significant role, he served for another set of years as a Manatee County Commissioner. Perhaps now he can focus on retirement. I consider him an old friend, not only because I've known him for a long time, but also because he was born 1 month before me. I am pleased to introduce an honorable friend, Colonel Larry Bussell, and his commanding officer, Edie Bussell. Larry, welcome to the show, and Edie, the same. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
Yeah. Larry, I want to start with your family, because your family has such a long history with the area. Could you tell me a little bit about that, please?
Yes, both my mother and my father moved to Florida in the early 1900s. My mother from Alabama, my father from South Georgia. It was during the tough times, and I guess they thought that things were better in Florida, much like it is today, people moving from other places to here. My dad and mom were great parents. I look back on my childhood as we didn't have very much money, but we sure had a lot of love and fun. And I'm a native of Florida. My dad has lived longer in Florida than I have, even at this point. And always sort of upset because people didn't treat him as a Florida cracker.
Along comes the Depression, and I guess your family needed a little baby in the house. So when were you born?
In 1935.
Yeah, and then you went to school.
Well, I grew up here in Manatee County, so I went to elementary school, junior high school, and high school in Manatee County.
And as you were growing up, we know that we've got some photos of you when you were a little boy, and you were a member of Boy Scouts. And
yes.
I think that's still a great organization today. If we can get some guys to get in there and
right.
keep
One of the regrets of my life is that I didn't stick around and make Eagle Scout. I was working real hard toward it and then got diverted by other things, I guess.
Yeah, well, that's because you became Mr. Jock in high school. I mean,
well, in junior high, I was a
yeah.
triple star, or or triple threat person, basketball, which I really don't care much about, football and baseball. I really love baseball. But
And on top of football and basketball.
right.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
in junior high, you could be in 3 different sports.
Yeah.
In high school, I guess I got interested in other things and
Yeah.
didn't go out for athletics.
Can you remember, when did you make a decision after graduation? When did you decide that you wanted to go military?
During high school, we had an exchange trip with a high school in Massachusetts. And coming back from that trip, I guess it was just before my senior year in high school, my dad said that the Congressman Haley was looking for candidates for the Naval Academy. And so I managed to take the competitive exam, and I won the exam, or I came out first, so
Wow.
I got an appointment to the Naval Academy after graduation from high school.
That's really cool. And then you had a couple of roommates. There were 3 of you in a room, right?
You could have up to 3 roommates. I guess some rooms actually had 4 at that time. I had 3.
Yeah.
And 2 of us are still alive. A third one was killed in Vietnam.
Oh, jeez, that's too bad. And then you in your academy years, just about everywhere you went, you had to march, right?
Yeah, we marched we had formations and marched to most classes.
Yeah, and
From-
also most meals too.
That's correct. Meal time as well.
Yeah.
And this is a weekly parade at the academy. This was the Color Girl parade, and this is graduation.
Yeah.
After that, we threw threw our hats up in the air and graduated.
Yeah, I always wondered, do you get your hat back after you throw it up in the
No,
air?
you don't need it anymore after that. It turns into a different color. I graduated and was commissioned in the U.S. Air Force. Excuse me. At that time, you could go in the Air Force after graduating from both Annapolis and West Point.
Yeah. So just to tell the audience that again, you went to the Naval Academy, but from there,
I was commissioned in the U.S. Air Force.
yeah. Okay, that's good. And
And this was the first operational fighter that I flew, the F-100 Super Sabre.
yeah, and that's what you really wanted to do, right? Fly.
Fly, yes.
Yeah, that's cool.
That was my plebe year, a month after I was sworn in as a midshipman at the Naval Academy.
Yeah. And then
One of our
this is
summer
cute.
training sessions, we played Marine, and so we had to dress like Marines, and that's what that one was.
Oh darn!
That's my father.
That's your dad.
Like I say, he
handsome
lived
guy.
a long and fruitful life. He was 96 when he passed away.
Yeah, great guy. And
That was
this-
my pilot training years. When I soloed, they threw me in this tank of water.
Sounds like fun.
As a first classman or senior at the Naval Academy.
Yeah, and
And
pretty
then
soon.
in November, after I graduated, in June of 1957, I married my sweetheart, Edie, and she's with me to this day.
Yeah. Now, I mean, what a chick. But but you weren't in the Naval Academy.
No.
Where's your home?
I'm from Philadelphia.
Oh, I know. That's north of here, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. And you fell in love with that, with this thing here?
Yes, we met on a blind date in Philadelphia, 4th of July,
But
1955.
you're still on a blind date, aren't you?
No.
Jeez.
No. I see everywhere now.
Yeah. And I had asked you a little bit, but I want to go a little bit farther with this. In Larry's career then, in the military, because his career took up 27 years, right?
Right.
Yeah, 27 years. During those 27 years, I don't know exactly how many different stations you had, I mean, number-wise, and it's not significant really, but you were at many different places.
Yeah, in 27 years, we had 21 moves.
21 moves.
Permanent change of station moves, yes.
And you said you got to go everywhere with him except to Vietnam.
Except to Vietnam.
Yeah, and, well, that's why his airplane went down. 'Cause, you could have been there taking care of him. But your love story is a really great one. I happen to be a very emotional and passionate guy, and I believe in love. And so when I am fortunate enough to meet two people who just celebrated 59 years of marriage, and that's very exciting to me. And I can't wait till 60 next year, because
Right.
we'll have the party at my house or
Okay.
something else.
Sounds good. We've been looking for a place.
And there you were. So, and so right away after you were from Philadelphia, and you were on leave. Were you on leave at that time, or
No, I was on a training mission or training session during the summer of 1955
Yeah,
when we met up in Philadelphia.
yeah. Wow, that's cool. 1955. I was on Guam then, so I missed the party.
Right.
And so after that,
After I was going through pilot training at Bartow Air Base in Florida, which is east of here. And we wanted to get married, and my curriculum at the pilot training wouldn't allow me to go on a leave. So they gave me a long pass for the Thanksgiving weekend in 1957, and we got married in Samoset and went on our honeymoon in St. Petersburg. So
I flew
Jeff.
down from Philly.
you had to kind of walk away from your family, right?
Yes.
You did. Well,
They
that's-
weren't too happy.
Oh, I'll bet you that's given up a lot. So, yeah, whoa, tough deal. Next on the agenda,
that was the F-100 again, and that was an airplane that after I got my wings, as an Air Force pilot, then I went to advanced training and I learned how to fly that airplane, and then I went overseas. We went initially to France and then to England, where we spent almost 4 years.
holy cow. Just still in training? Is that the idea?
In operational flying at that point.
Wow. Yeah. And then I know what this is.
In Vietnam,
We're jumping ahead.
I went to graduate school after my first operational tour over in England, and got a master's degree in astronautics. And then I went to check out in the F-4 Phantom II aircraft to go to Vietnam.
Okay. And the F-4 was the plane of Vietnam? Is that right?
was the airplane of Vietnam for the Air Force.
How did it do?
Well, it was a great airplane. It would go fast, but it also carried a lot of ordnance, and it was a very reliable airplane. I was flying it on the 11th of September 1968, and that was my 130th mission in Vietnam.
That's incredible.
68th mission over North Vietnam, when I was rolling in to mark a target, and a anti-aircraft gun was able to hit us, and we were shot down. My backseater and he ejected over the target area in North Vietnam, and apparently was injured very badly, and he perished en route to Hanoi. He had been captured. I stayed in the airplane and went out over the water, and as you said earlier, I was picked up by an Air Force Jolly Green helicopter.
Mm-hmm. Thank
So
God.
I spent about 45 minutes in the Gulf of Tonkin, and then I was very fortunate to be picked up, and I had suffered some flailing injuries due to going pretty fast when I ejected.
Yeah.
And both arms and both knees were fractured. So I wound up in the hospital in Japan. That's where that picture is.
So when you eject, the injuries came from the ejection, is that right?
It came from the airspeed that I was going, the flailing, the high-speed ejection.
How fast might you have been going, do you think?
I don't know, maybe 500 miles per hour or something like that.
And how soon after he was hit, did you find out that he had been injured?
They had ham radio operators that called even ahead of a formal notification. And it wasn't too long after he was picked up that we found out.
Amazing. And where were you at the time?
Every night when I came home from work, I worked at Manatee Memorial Hospital while Larry was in Vietnam, 3 to 11. I would come home and write a letter and take it down to the post office because they had a 2 a.m. pickup, and they called at that time, around that time.
Wow.
And I found out and then got an official notification in the morning.
How'd you feel about that?
I didn't know what to feel. It was like being hit with something and you can't figure out what to do.
Yeah.
I couldn't go to see him,
Yeah, right.
and so we talked on the phone.
If
1 month I had almost an $800 telephone bill. And that he couldn't write,
no.
so we talked.
So how long were you in the hospital?
I guess about 6 months. 6 months after I was shot down, I passed a flight physical and was back on flying status. And
As soon as you could walk.
fortunately,
Huh?
yeah.
And the funniest thing, they told him he'd never fly again. And he
Wow.
did.
Wow, that's good. That's really great. That's a great story. Yeah, you're a good man. Okay, so we'll move on after that.
That was one of my missions in Vietnam. We were hit once again by anti-aircraft fire.
Yeah.
In this particular case, I brought the airplane back because one engine was damaged, the other one was not. So thankfully, I was able to bring the
so you
airplane
can
all the
fly
way back.
on one. Yeah. That's a World War II song too.
Yeah. On a wing and a prayer.
Though there's one motor gone, we will still carry on. Yeah, that's really great. Did you have to? I'm sure you did have to worry about enemy aircraft as well as ground fire, right?
Well, you always are concerned about that, but the area of North Vietnam that I flew in was the southern part, and the MiGs didn't really come down there, so
Oh, okay.
didn't really have too much of a worry
Yeah,
about
because that was a pretty good plane, right? The
Yes.
MiG.
Yes.
Okay.
That's a typical air refueling mission in the F-4, the KC-135 tanker aircraft.
How often did you have to get refueled? Or does that,
Well, it depended on what kind of a mission we were flying, but the mission that I was flying on the day that we were shot down, I had been out for an air refueling just prior to getting shot down.
Whoa.
So you'd fly maybe for an hour and a half or 2 hours maybe at the max, and then go out and get refueled.
2 hours?
Go out over the Gulf of Tonkin.
Uh-oh.
After I got back on flying status, I went to the Air Force Test Pilot School,
Yeah.
and that was one of the flights that I was on. It's called an NF-104, which was a rocket-powered aircraft.
Yeah.
It was simulating flight that would be later part of the shuttle astronaut program, because the 104 could go very fast, and we would zoom it up to, on my mission, I went up to 105,000 feet. And then across the top, and you look out at the round world and the dark sky above, then you more or less a powered glide back to Edwards Air Force Base, simulating a shuttle recovery.
You don't want to eject at 100,000.
No.
No, I don't think so.
No, you didn't, because of, well, we had.
But you had a real interest in
we
that.
carried, or we wore spacesuits for that mission because there was no pressurization in the aircraft at that point.
Wow.
So you had to wear a pressure suit, and that was powered by the auxiliary system.
Wow. That's really cool. But you had an interest. Did you think you were going to maybe go into space
Well, I
someday?
aspired to, but I had tried to get in the astronaut program, but best I could tell is that they said I was too tall to. At that time, they were looking for astronauts that were less than 6 feet tall.
Yeah, I never had a problem being too tall. I know what it's like to dream about doing something. I had an opportunity to go to Antarctica with Admiral Byrd. His last mission was called Operation Deep Freeze. The Navy sent him a letter, and they copied me, and it said I was indispensable to my duty station. Whoa, that's pretty cool. Yeah, and now I know what this is, but
That
still,
was my last flight in the F-4 aircraft, and it was in probably May or June of 1982.
yeah. And on
They
your last
hosed,
flight,
they hosed
give
me
you
down after my last flight.
The Air Force has a lot of traditions, doesn't it? I mean,
Right.
the way they treat you and so on.
It's sort of a bittersweet day because I knew that I wouldn't be flying that airplane anymore, and
Yeah.
that was sort of a sad day.
Oh, I'll bet you. Yeah.
After retiring from the Air Force, I
Oh,
worked
my.
for a company that, actually, I think I was still in the Air Force as a colonel at that time, and we went over to Saudi Arabia to help the Saudis determine what their Air Force should look like in the future.
Mm-hmm.
And this was one weekend in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia.
Do they have all American aircraft now? And
At that time, they had some British aircraft, but
Right.
I think they have pretty much all American aircraft. And this was an award ceremony where my boss, a two-star general, was pinning on a Legion of Merit award that I had received for 2 years in Izmir, Turkey. And after retirement, we had enough time and fortunately enough money to buy a little sailboat, and this is sailing on the Potomac in a boat that we call the Samoset.
why would you call it Samoset?
That was my
I know.
hometown, my home community.
That's where it all started for you.
That's where it started. Yeah. Sailing on the Potomac again,
Yeah.
sunset.
And,
That's Mount Vernon in the background, George Washington's home.
hi, George. Yeah. Well, you still do sailing, right? Or
No, not
boating?
anymore.
No sailing?
Unfortunately, we sold our sailboat when we were going overseas again.
Oh, okay.
I took a job as a civilian in Turkey from 92 to 94, and we didn't want to leave the boat up on blocks for that long a time.
Yeah. But you don't like staying on one job for too long either, right?
Right.
I mean, you move
Exactly,
around
yeah.
quite a bit. This is tell us about this. I love this picture.
Our daughter was in the class of 82 at the Naval Academy, our oldest daughter, Kathy.
Yeah.
And I was fortunate to be able to swear her in at graduation in 1982.
That's fantastic.
I was a colonel stationed in the Pentagon at that time.
And Kathy did
Kathy
a great
went
thing too.
into naval aviation and flew helicopters for most of her time, and then decided to come back to Pensacola as a fixed-wing instructor pilot.
Mm-hmm.
And then at a point in time, she decided to get out of the Navy and go to work for United Airlines. And she today is a first officer for United Airlines.
That's fantastic. But I think Kathy is an example for young people what might happen if you go into the military.
Yeah, she was in the third class that had women at the Naval Academy.
Yeah.
The first class was a class of 80, and she was in the class of 82.
Yeah. Man, oh man, that's pretty good.
And that's my ID card as a retired officer.
Yeah, and you mentioned so many places, but the Pentagon. Did you spend time there too, right?
I did. I spent 2 tours in the Pentagon.
And did you have any particular job, or did you just sit there?
Well, I was, at that time, I was retired as I was a a lieutenant colonel, my first assignment, and I was working on airplane requirements, fighter requirements.
Wow.
You know, what the F-16s and F-15s and F-22s would look like in the future.
Wow. Pretty good. How often does an aircraft change? Does the number one, do you have any idea?
How often does it what?
Do we replace an aircraft? Like you were in the,
Well, it depends on the aircraft and depends on the funding and the many factors.
yeah,
The B-52, which I never flew except once as a candidate test pilot, the B-52 is over 50 years old
and it's still flying.
and still flying, and the F-100 is maybe flying someplace, not in the Air Force, nor is the F-4.
Yeah.
But-
How many foreign countries have American aircraft?
Oh my, I
Would
don't,
you
I
say?
don't know offhand, but many,
Maybe two.
many, tens of or 20.
Yeah. Oh, whoops.
That's a close-up of the F-4, Phantom II.
Yeah. And this is me. I love this. We have to make sure the audience can read this. The average pilot, despite the somewhat swaggering exterior, is very much capable of such feelings as love, affection, intimacy, and caring. These feelings just don't involve
Anyone else?
anyone else. Yeah. So that's very generous of pilots to feel that way, I think.
Right.
Yeah. And here you, no, this is a different. Tell us about this picture. This is,
This was some meeting, like a Daedalians meeting. Daedalians is a fraternity of military aviators, and that was a two-star General Perry Smith, who he and I were apparently part of the MC for that meeting of that group. We were wearing our mess dress uniforms.
yeah. And this is a better picture. This is another favorite.
This is my father and my two brothers.
Yeah. Do you want to say anything about your brothers
Well,
or your dad?
they're all natives of Florida also. Went up through local schools and have retired here in Bradenton.
Yeah. So you went to schools in Manatee County, but you did okay.
Yeah, they did okay also.
Yeah.
All three of us served in the military. My brother Dwayne on the right, far right, he was in the Navy for a couple of years, graduate of Georgia Tech. My brother Greg was a graduate of Florida State and went in the Air Force and flew tankers, KC-135 tankers, for 5 years.
Boy, that's a big plane. Yeah. Wow. Great family. And
Been involved in a lot of military-related organizations like the Military Order of the World
right.
Wars. This was the local chapter, and I was presented the Patrick Henry Award, I believe is what this was for.
now, after, let's see, kind of get the first part of your life together, right? I know. You grew up here in Samoset, went to school in Manatee County, graduated from high school, right away gone. You didn't even, did you stop and say goodbye to anybody, or you just
Barely.
went and you were gone right away?
And when I retired from the Air Force, I worked for about 10 years in the Northern Virginia area, and then
10 years.
came back home apparently to retire. That was the plan, but didn't exactly work out that way.
No.
I was persuaded to get involved in Palmetto politics, and don't know why I did that, but I did. And I ran for mayor of Palmetto in 2002 and was elected. So this is one of the parades after being elected.
And you must have just hated that, huh, Edie? Is that right?
You think I was going to jump out?
Yeah.
Here we go. That's,
That was, I think, a children's parade once again in Palmetto, which is usually held in early November, probably just before Veterans Day.
I think
in that time
most
frame.
of the parades these days, it seems to me there are more parades in Palmetto than there are in Bradenton, right?
Well, I was very upset one time when we were in Veterans Day service, and there were no bands in the parade. That upset
Couldn't
me quite a
agree
bit.
more. I couldn't
When I
agree
was
more.
growing up here and in high school, I played in the band, and we were really delighted to be able to march in.
You played in the
local-
band plus football plus
Right. But
baseball. Jeez. Yeah, I think I couldn't agree with you more.
you and I
because
were in an organization that were tried to get spirit of patriotism reinstalled in our local area, and we were able to get a parade or two that had all the bands, all 6 high schools
Yeah.
had the bands in the
Yeah.
parade.
And you'll recall we had the West Point band join us.
Yes, indeed.
In at least one year.
Right.
Oh, and this is
Flying
this,
in a friend's bonanza over Florida here someplace.
yeah, just messing around.
Right.
A day off.
This is fun flying, yes.
Yeah.
This was my last day as mayor of Palmetto, and I walked out and I took a picture of the board that shows who all was in Palmetto at that time, in Palmetto
How
government.
many years were you mayor?
7 years.
7 years.
Right.
Wow. And there's your neat.
That was my
organized
office.
Yeah. Couple of pictures on the wall. And plaques.
Had a good period of time. We were able to fix a lot of things that were broken in Palmetto.
Do you love Palmetto?
Absolutely. It was not where I was born and raised, but it's certainly a great town, and I was happy to be mayor for 7 years.
Yeah. Did you like that job, Edie? Your job as mayor?
I liked anything that I was presented with
Yeah.
and had a good time.
Yeah.
Then I was persuaded to run for county commission.
Yeah.
And in developing my campaign, I posed for this picture to show that I was a business-oriented candidate, and a couple of friends of mine, plus a photographer, put these together to go into a campaign brochure.
And were you elected commissioner?
In 2008,
And how long did you
and I
accept
served
that role?
until 2016.
Yeah.
So
was that a good role for you?
Yeah, it was a very pleasing job because you had an opportunity to fix things and to make sure that the taxpayers' money was spent properly.
Yeah. Well, you're an honest fellow. Do you?
I like to think so,
Well,
yes.
yeah. All the people in politics, are they as honest as you? Have you? Is
I
that
would,
your
I
experience?
would say yes,
Yeah,
but
I know, but you're you're
but
fibbing.
you know, as a commissioner, you're responsible for developing and executing policy, and for producing a budget,
Yeah.
and then making sure that the budget is spent properly.
Yeah.
So you know, it's a job that has a lot of responsibility, and I was very pleased and honored to be elected and to serve.
Yeah, I think Mark Twain, I remember once he said, suppose I was talking to an idiot. Now suppose I'm talking to a member of Congress. But wait a minute, I repeat myself. And, you know, I don't know this, and even with the latest election, well, we're not going there. We're going here. And that's an absolutely beautiful picture. Gosh darn it. It's really, you're as cute as you were
Oh,
60 years ago. I mean, how nice, how nice. And boy, Larry, you look like a real executive. Well, you were at that time. And that's more like you guys.
Well, we've been a team for a long time, as you
That's a
said,
good
59
word.
years, and
Yeah.
Edie has been there to support me throughout all of that,
Yeah,
the highs and the lows.
yeah,
And there's the brochure that we were preparing.
yeah.
One of the fundraising
Oh, we're
pictures that we, during the years, I think it must have been a Republican Party event or something, but Pat Glass and Mike Bennett joined us. And that was the Martin Luther King Jr. banquet in 2008.
yeah.
I was presented the Edgar Price Humanitarian Award at that banquet. It was a very prestigious award.
Yeah.
This was when I was sworn in. Judge Boylston swore me in as county commissioner for the first time in 2008.
And you've been sworn in twice, right?
Yes.
And are you through with politics, or are you running for president?
I
No.
I am. I'm finished with politics as much as a person can be finished with politics.
Yeah.
I think most citizens that owe them should be involved in politics. Otherwise, the government you get is what you get,
Yeah.
and you have an opportunity as a citizen to influence government.
Yeah. I had a fellow named Lee Daniels, who was the Speaker of the House of the state of Illinois. And he was introducing me once to an audience, and he said, "Many of you know Dr. Len. He is the flamingo in the barnyard of politics." I had no interest in politics. A couple of Republicans.
I think that was when Governor Bush came to Manatee County for some purpose, and it escapes me as to what it was, but I'm honored to have my picture taken with him.
Do you miss those days? I mean, you haven't been out that long. You've only.
I'm sort of adjusting to the idea of being away from politics, so
Yeah, maybe you get the sailboat back.
age has caught up with me.
Yeah.
One of the events that during the years as a commissioner, where Mayor Poston, I think it was Councilman Jim Golden and former Green Bay Packers quarterback Bart Starr and me at a fundraising event.
Yeah. Good group. And there you are again.
Once again involved in veterans activities, and I was honored by the Manatee County Veterans Council as a Veteran of the Year in 2013.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And this is really holy cow.
A group of us were tasked with the job of going to Korea and lobbying to get the 2013 World Rowing Championships in Florida, and in fact at Benderson Park in Sarasota. And we were very fortunate to prevail, and as you know, the
Unbelievable.
2017
Yeah.
Rowing Championship will be in Sarasota at the Benderson Park.
Absolutely fantastic. You got that done. Now, these are gorgeous pictures.
We were dressed to go to the Snooty Gala. I was on the board of directors of the South Florida Museum, and we dressed up and took a picture. Had a beautiful sunset that evening, so we got a picture out there in front of our house
Yeah,
on the river.
and there you are. The formal. With the professional photographer. Yeah, that's really great. And
A lobbying trip to Washington, D.C. During my time as commissioner.
Wow. Do you spend a lot of time in Washington or no?
Well, as an Air Force officer, I was there for a better part of about 8 years, I think.
Yeah. Oh, whoa,
the Pentagon.
8 years. 2 of them were at the Pentagon.
Well, 5 first time, or 4 the first time, and then 2 the second time. So
Wow. So
but
you
this
know
was
this-
as a commissioner,
Yeah. Wow.
and it was cold, and we were glad to be home when we got back.
And look
This
at
was a Military Officers Association picture. We were dressed for that. Have an annual Christmas dance, and that was where that was.
Does he step on your toes a lot? Tell the
No,
truth.
he's very good.
And now the cowboy.
As mayor and at the Hobnob and sponsored by the Chamber of Commerce.
Oh God,
This is why we live in Florida.
Yeah, it's a fantastic picture, and you guys get to see that every day, pretty much, right?
Almost.
Yeah, almost. Yeah, and
The picture of our home, front of our home in Palmetto, and my little Triumph Spitfire that I bought when I was stationed in England. Bought it new in England, have had it ever since.
and that was an early time in your career.
That was in the early 60s.
Military career, yeah.
Yes.
Wow. Okay. Now
And
we
our
get-
family with
Yeah.
4 children.
Well, I think this is an absolutely fantastic picture. I just love that picture. You really have such a nice family, and your daughter Pilot is on the left, which
That's correct.
Yeah, but she's in civies.
Right.
And they're a great family, great family, great husband and wife. I can't wait to that 60th party. Gosh darn, it's
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
just a year, just another year. And we're going to be married 2 years pretty soon. No, I'm only kidding.
2 years.
No. But we're not anywhere near you guys. We're at 43 and still counting. You know,
Right.
But, yeah. But anyway, are there some questions, or is there a question that you wanted me to ask you and I did not? Is there anything you can think of?
Well, I mentioned it a little bit, but I really think that I was honored to serve at local government, and local government is the government closest to the people.
That's right.
And the biggest job that you have as a local government member is to be a good steward of the people's money, the taxpayers' dollars. And I think that I took that very seriously during the time I was in as mayor and as a county commissioner. And it was, I think it was amazing to me how nicely my career in the Air Force fit with local government,
That's
serving as a
amazing.
government.
Yeah.
I had been a base commander at one point in my career as an Air Force officer, and it's essentially like being a mayor of a
Sure.
town.
Would be.
And that was one of the reasons that I thought that I could be a mayor and be successful, and I feel like I was, and so. But I don't think I could have done it at all without the support of my wife. So,
Yeah. Well, she's a boss.
Yep.
Yeah. And Edie, how about you? Do you have a last comment that you'd like to make, or anything that you might want to tell young people or others who might be thinking about going into life?
I think the one thing I would say is never give up.
Yeah.
I think of Larry's recovery after he was shot down. There were several months where he could not do anything for himself.
Yeah.
Arms were in splints, legs were in casts, but he didn't give up.
Yeah.
And at that time, they told him he'd never fly again, he'd never do this, he'd never do that. And he went on and did a lot of things,
Yeah, he did.
great things.
Yes, he did. Yeah, really. You have, Larry. You're a great man.
Well, thank you.
Well, I feel like I've known you for a long time.
Well, we have known each other, and I appreciate that.
Yeah. Well, it's part of my blessing. Thank you very much.
And
you.
mine too.
And that concludes our program for today. A special thanks go to our guests, Larry and his wife, Edie. There's also got to be thanks for the great staff of METV for making this program possible. My biggest thanks goes to you, each and every member of our audience, for taking some of your precious time to watch today's program. Please remember, all of America's veterans, freedom is never free. And without our veterans, there would be no America. Thank you.